Hello everyone and welcome to Endless Romance. Dear friends, what if the life you built for 20 years suddenly slipped through your fingers? What if the person who once vowed to love you forever decided that forever had an expiration date? Anna never imagined she'd be standing at the edge of her marriage, watching the man she thought she knew walk away. She had done everything right, been a loyal wife, a devoted mother, a woman who believed in love that could weather any storm. But in the end, none of it was enough. David wanted more. More excitement. More passion. More of something he couldn't quite name. And in his search for it, he left behind the very things that made his life whole. First, he was convinced he had won. His new life was thrilling nights out in the city, younger women, the intoxicating taste of freedom. But what happens when the excitement fades? When the people who once cheered you on disappear? When the home you walked away from is no longer waiting for you? And what about Anna? How do you rebuild after losing everything? How do you find the strength to let go of the past and believe in love again? This is a story of choices and consequences, of love lost and love rediscovered. It's about the things we take for granted, the people we hurt, and the moments that define who we become. By the end of this journey, you'll see the power of karma, the resilience of the human heart, and the truth that goodness always finds its way home. So stay with us, because in the next few minutes, you might just find the answer to a question you never thought to ask. A story of regret and second chances. The late autumn wind rattled the branches outside my window, sending golden leaves tumbling across the driveway. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty coffee cup in my hands, the same one I used to fill for him every morning. It had been a year since David left. I thought time would dull the pain, that one day I'd wake up and find the ache in my chest had disappeared. But grief had a way of lingering, settling into the corners of my life like dust that refused to be wiped away. I turned toward the window, watching the last remnants of daylight stretch across the yard. The house was quiet now, except for the distant sound of Emily laughing in her bedroom. Josh sat at the dining table, his head buried in a textbook, pencil tapping absently against the wood. For 20 years, this house had been filled with warmth, with love. Now there was an emptiness I couldn't quite fill. I thought back to when David and I first met. We were young then, barely in our 20s, full of dreams and late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. I had been working as a part-time librarian while finishing college, and he had just started at an accounting firm. He was charming in a quiet way, the kind of man who didn't demand attention but held it effortlessly. Our love had been simple, easy. We got married in the spring, beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Life wasn't always perfect, but it was ours. Then, somewhere along the way, something changed. First, it was subtle. David started coming home later than usual, blaming long hours at work. He spent more time scrolling through his phone, his laughter quieter, more distant. Our conversations became shorter, the silences between us stretching longer. I told myself it was just stress, that he was tired, that we had been married too long for him to still look at me the way he used to. But deep down I knew better. One evening after putting the kids to bed, I found him sitting on the couch, staring at his phone. I walked over, curling up next to him. "Hey," I murmured, resting my head on his shoulder. "What are you looking at?" He hesitated for half a second, just long enough for my stomach to drop before tilting his phone away. "Nothing important." I forced a smile. "You've been on that thing a lot lately." He sighed, setting it down on the table. I don't know, Anna. I feel like I'm missing something." The words stung, but I ignored them. "It's just a phase," I told myself. "Every marriage goes through rough patches. He'll come back to me." But he didn't. Instead, he drifted further away. A month later, he started going to the gym again. At first, I was happy for him. He had always talked about getting back in shape. But soon it became an obsession. He spent hours lifting weights, drinking protein shakes, checking himself in the mirror like a man trying to chase a version of himself he had lost. Then came the new clothes, the expensive cologne, the sudden interest in social media, in following fitness influencers and models who posted pictures of themselves in bikinis, their bodies airbrushed into perfection. I tried not to let it bother me. But when he started guarding his phone like a secret, when he started smiling at messages he never let me see, something inside me began to break. One night, I woke up to find his side of the bed empty. I padded downstairs, heart pounding, and found him sitting in the dim glow of his phone. "David," I whispered. He flinched, locking the screen before looking up at me. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice softer than I felt. "Just checking emails," he said too quickly. We stared at each other, and for the first time in 20 years, I realized I didn't recognize my own husband. The man who used to hold my hand under the dinner table. The man who once danced with me in the kitchen, long after the music had stopped. The man who used to kiss me goodnight like he meant it. I swallowed the lump in my throat and turned away. That was the moment I knew. I had already lost him. The talk that changed everything. The night he told me he wanted a divorce, I was making dinner. The kids were at their grandparents' house, and I was humming softly as I stirred the sauce on the stove. The air smelled like basil and garlic, the kitchen filled with the kind of warmth that made a house feel like a home. David walked in, looking restless. I turned to greet him, but the words died on my lips when I saw his expression, distant, unreadable, like he had already left. "We need to talk," he said. I turned off the stove, wiping my hands on a dish towel. My heart pounded. "Okay," I said cautiously. He hesitated before speaking, his hands gripping the back of a chair. "I can't do this anymore, Anna." I frowned. "Do what?" "This." He gestured vaguely around the kitchen, around the life we had built. Us. The marriage. Feel stuck. Like I'm suffocating. The air in the room seemed to thin. "David, where is this coming from?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't know. I need more. I need passion, excitement. I want to feel alive again." I felt my throat tighten. "Are you saying I don't make you feel alive?" He looked at me then, eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe. Regret. But not enough to stop him from doing what he was about to do. "I love you, Anna," he said softly, "but not the way I used to." And just like that, my world shattered. The days after David's confession felt like a bad dream. The kind that left me waking up gasping for air. The world around me kept moving, traffic lights still changed from red to green. The sun still rose each morning, but inside, I felt frozen in place, stuck between the past and an uncertain future. David didn't leave right away. For weeks, we lived in the same house but felt miles apart. We still went through the motions, sharing meals, talking about the kids, sleeping under the same roof, but everything between us had changed. I kept hoping he would wake up one morning and realize what he was throwing away. That he'd look at me and see the woman he had once promised forever to. But he never did. Instead, he became more distant, more checked out. The late nights at the gym turned into full weekends out with friends. The guarded phone became a permanent fixture in his hand. And the man I had built a life with, the man who had once traced circles on my back as I fell asleep, became nothing more than a stranger in our home. One evening, as I sat in the living room folding laundry, David walked in, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. "I found an apartment," he said, his voice flat. The breath left my lungs. I set down the towel in my hands, forcing myself to look up. "Oh." It was all I could manage. He shifted on his feet. "I think it's best if I move out. Give us both space." Space. As if that was all we needed to fix what was broken. I swallowed, gripping the fabric between my fingers. "When?" His jaw tightened. "Next week." A week. That was all I had left before our life as we knew it was over. I nodded, even though I wanted to scream. "What about the kids?" He hesitated. "I'll see them whenever I can. We can figure out a schedule." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. We weren't negotiating vacation plans. We were dismantling a family. But what choice did I have? So I nodded again. And just like that, my marriage was over. Telling the kids. The hardest part wasn't losing David. It was watching my children lose their father. We sat them down that weekend, the four of us gathered in the living room. Emily curled up on one end of the couch, her long legs tucked beneath her. Josh sat cross-legged on the floor, fidgeting with the string on his hoodie. David cleared his throat, his hands clasped together. "Your mom and I have something to tell you." Emily immediately stiffened. She was 16, old enough to sense when something was wrong. Josh, only 12, just looked between us wide-eyed. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to speak. "Your dad and I have decided." That we're going to separate. Silence. Then, what? Emily's voice cracked, her arms tightening around her chest. David sighed. It's for the best. Josh's forehead creased. Why? David hesitated. Because we think it'll make us both happier. Josh shook his head. That doesn't make sense. And he was right. It didn't. But there was nothing else to say. Emily was the first to leave. She stormed upstairs, slamming her bedroom door so hard the walls shook. Josh just sat there, blinking rapidly as if trying to process the words. Are you leaving? He finally asked. David exhaled. Yeah, buddy. I got an apartment. Josh looked down at his hands. So you're just done with us? David flinched. Of course not. I'll still see you. All the time. Josh's eyes, his father's eyes filled with tears. But it won't be the same, he whispered. David had no response to that. Neither did I. The day he left. The morning David moved out, the sky was gray. The air thick with the weight of an oncoming storm. I stood at the doorway, arms wrapped around myself as I watched him load the last of his things into his car. The house felt hollow already. His clothes were gone from the closet. His cologne no longer lingered in the bathroom. The coffee mug he once used every morning sat untouched in the cabinet. He turned to face me, shifting uncomfortably. I guess. This is it. I nodded, unable to speak. He hesitated before rubbing the back of his neck. Anna, Don't. I cut him off. He sighed. I never wanted to hurt you. I let out a breathless laugh. Then maybe you shouldn't have. He looked away. I need to do this. I need to figure out who I am. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the bitter response on the tip of my tongue. David had always been good at making things sound noble. As if leaving his family was some kind of self-discovery journey instead of what it really was, selfishness. He took a step forward as if he was going to hug me. I stepped back. His face fell, but he nodded, accepting it. Without another word, he got into his car and drove away. I stood there, watching until his taillights disappeared down the street. And then, for the first time since this all began, I let myself fall apart. The reality of divorce. People don't talk about the small ways divorce breaks you. It's not just the big things: splitting assets, custody agreements, the awkward conversations with mutual friends who don't know whose side to take. It's the quiet moments that hurt the most. Like setting the table and realizing there's one less plate. Like rolling over in bed and reaching for someone who isn't there. Like seeing your child's face light up when their father calls, only to watch the light fade when he cancels plans. I learned to navigate a new kind of loneliness. I went to work, made dinner, helped the kids with homework. I smiled when people asked how I was doing, lied through my teeth when they said I looked great. But at night, when the house was dark and silent, I would sit on the edge of my bed and wonder how I had ended up here. How the man who once promised to love me forever had decided forever had an expiration date. I wanted to hate him. Some nights I did. But most nights I just felt empty. A new life for him, a harder one for me. David, on the other hand, seemed to flourish. He went out with friends, posted pictures from bars and rooftop restaurants. He bought new clothes, got a haircut, even started lifting weights. And then, of course, there were the women. Young, beautiful, always different. Emily stopped checking his social media after a while. It hurt too much. Josh, though, held on longer. He still believed his dad would wake up one day and realize what he had lost. But I knew better. I knew that David was chasing something he would never find. That no matter how many women he dated, how many nights he spent drinking under neon lights, he would never fill the emptiness inside him. Because the problem had never been me. It had always been him. And one day, whether it took months or years, he would realize it. By then it would be too late. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. Divorce is strange. One day you're sharing a life, a home, a bed with someone, planning vacations, laughing over inside jokes, talking about what you'll do when the kids grow up. And then suddenly you're just strangers. David and I went from being husband and wife to something far colder: legal co-parents with schedules to maintain, finances to separate, and an unspoken agreement to keep things civil for the sake of the kids. But the hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was the silence. It was knowing that the man who used to reach for my hand in the middle of the night was now holding someone else's. It was watching my children struggle to understand why their father, who had once been the center of their universe, now only existed in fragments. Weekend visits, phone calls that were sometimes forgotten, texts that went unanswered. And it was realizing slowly but surely that I had spent so much of my life building something with a man who had been willing to throw it all away for a fantasy. David's new life. David embraced bachelorhood like a man who had been let loose after years in captivity. At first, it was small things: the gym, the new clothes, the sudden interest in social media. But then it became something more. He started posting pictures of nights out in the city, cocktails on rooftops, fancy dinners, parties with people I had never met. And then came the women. They were always younger, always beautiful, always temporary. First, I tried not to look. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I needed to move on. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the bed felt too big, I would open his Instagram and see the life he was building without us. One night, Emily stormed into my room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Have you seen this?" she demanded, shoving it toward me. On the screen was a picture of David at a bar, his arm wrapped around a girl who couldn't have been older than 25. She was leaning into him, her smile bright, her dress barely covering her legs. The caption read, "Starting over never felt so good." I stared at it, feeling something inside me crack. Emily's face was red with anger. "He's disgusting," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Emily dash. No, Mom. He left us. And now he's acting like none of this ever happened. Like we didn't exist." Her voice wavered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "How can he do this?" I didn't have an answer, because I was asking myself the same thing. Falling apart. The thing about pretending to be okay is that eventually the cracks start to show. First, I held it together. I went to work. I made dinner. I smiled when people asked how I was doing. But inside I was drowning. Nights were the hardest. I would lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the weight of everything I had lost. I had spent 20 years building a life with David, and in the end it hadn't been enough. What did that say about me? Was I the fool for believing in forever? Or was he the fool for throwing it away? I didn't know. All I knew was that I was tired. Tired of pretending I wasn't angry. Tired of pretending I wasn't heartbroken. Tired of pretending that I didn't miss the man he used to be. Because I did. I missed the David who used to hold my hand during scary movies. The David who danced with me in the kitchen. The David who once promised that no matter what, we would always find our way back to each other. But that man didn't exist anymore. And it was time I stopped waiting for him to come home. The first date. It was Emily who finally convinced me to put myself back out there. "You need to move on," she told me one evening as we sat in the living room, eating takeout. I raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do you suggest I do that?" She smirked. "I signed you up for a dating app." I nearly choked on my food. "You what?" She grinned, completely unbothered. "You heard me. Emily dash. Mom, come on. Dad's already acting like he's 25 again. Meanwhile, you're sitting at home watching reruns of Grey's Anatomy." I crossed my arms. "I like Grey's Anatomy." She rolled her eyes. "That's not the point. The point is you deserve to be happy." I sighed, shaking my head. "Dating apps are for dash. People who are looking for love," she interrupted. "Yeah, exactly. And that includes you." I opened my mouth to argue, but the truth was I didn't have a real reason to say no. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was time. So I let her set up my profile. And 2 days later I had my first date in over 20 years. Mark. His name was Mark. He was a single father, divorced for 3 years, raising a teenage daughter on his own. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. I was nervous. My hands trembled as I smoothed down my dress, my heart pounding as I scanned the theft for his face. And then I saw him. Tall. Dark hair with a hint of gray at the temples. A warm smile that put me at ease instantly. "Anna?" he asked, his voice kind. I nodded, offering a small smile. "That's me." We sat down, ordered coffee, and before I knew it, we were talking. Really talking. About our kids. About our divorces. About the strange, unexpected loneliness that came with losing a person who was still alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt understood. I felt seen. By the end of the night, I was laughing, real genuine laughter that I hadn't heard from myself in years. Mark smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I'd really like to see you again. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because for the first time since David left, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Hope. And that terrified me. But as I looked across the table at Mark, something inside me whispered, take the chance. So I did. I smiled back. I'd like that too. And just like that, my life started over. Started with small things. A missed call here. Forgotten visit there. At first, David still showed up for the kids. He picked them up on weekends, took them out to dinner, made sure they saw his apartment, proof that he had landed on his feet, that leaving had been the right decision. But over time, the cracks began to show. Emily noticed first. One evening, she sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her, books scattered across the surface. She was supposed to be studying for a chemistry test, but instead, she kept glancing at her phone, her fingers tapping anxiously against the tabletop. What's wrong? I asked, setting a cup of tea beside her. She sighed. Dad was supposed to pick us up for dinner tonight. I frowned, glancing at the clock. It was almost 7. Did he call? She shook her head. I texted him an hour ago. Nothing. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to make an excuse for him. Instead, I just sat beside her and waited. At 7:45, her phone buzzed. She grabbed it instantly, her expression hopeful only to have it fall a second later. He canceled, she muttered. Said he lost track of time. Josh walked in from the living room, pulling out a chair. Again. Emily huffed, slamming her laptop shut. This is like the 4th time. Josh shrugged, trying to act like he didn't care. I told you he doesn't care anymore. I winced at his words. Josh dash. He looked at me, his brown eyes the same shade as David's, hard with frustration. It's true. I wanted to tell them they were wrong, that David still loved them, that he wasn't forgetting them on purpose. But I wasn't sure I believed it myself. David's descent. Over the next few months, David's life unraveled. At first, I only saw glimpses. A picture of him at a bar, eyes glazed over, a drink in his hand. A post on social media about a fresh start, only for it to be deleted a few days later. Then, Emily overheard a conversation between him and one of his friends. He got fired, Mom, she told me one evening, her voice quiet. From his job. I blinked. David. She nodded. His friend was giving him a hard time about it. Something about showing up late, missing meetings. I felt my stomach sink. David had worked at the same accounting firm for nearly 15 years. He had always taken pride in his career, and now he was losing it. I wasn't sure why I felt sad about it. Maybe because, despite everything, I had once loved him. Maybe because deep down I knew that leaving hadn't made him any happier. And maybe because a small part of me had hoped he would find the peace he was looking for. Instead, he was spiraling. And I refused to let him take the kids down with him. The phone call. It happened late one night. I was lying in bed reading when my phone buzzed. David's name flashed across the screen. I debated ignoring it, but something told me to pick up. His voice was slurred when he spoke. Anna. I sat up. David? What's wrong? A bitter laugh. Everything. I swallowed. Where are you? At some bar. I don't know. Doesn't matter. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Are you drunk? He exhaled. Yeah, I think so. I rubbed my temple. David, you need to go home. I don't have a home, Anna. His words hung between us, heavy and broken. I didn't know what to say. For years, he had made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like our life together had been the thing holding him back. But now, standing in the wreckage of his choices, he was finally realizing the truth. I made a mistake, he murmured. I exhaled. I know. Silence. I miss you, he admitted. I miss us. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. David, I said softly, we don't exist anymore. The last goodbye. The next morning, David showed up at my house. He looked rough, his shirt wrinkled, his hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes. I want to fix things, he said. I sighed. David dash. I know I messed up, he continued. I was selfish. I thought I wanted freedom, but all I did was destroy my life. I swallowed. You didn't just destroy your life. He flinched. I know. He reached out then as if to touch my hand, but I stepped back. Anna, please, he whispered. Can't we try again? I thought about the years I had spent waiting for him to love me the way I deserved. The nights I had cried myself to sleep. The way our children had suffered because of his choices. And then I thought about Mark. About the way he made me feel seen, loved, safe. I shook my head. No, David. We can't. His face crumpled. But don't you miss us? He asked. I took a deep breath. I miss the man I married, I admitted. But he's not here anymore. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but I had nothing left to give him. I stepped back, wrapping my arms around myself. You should go, I said gently. He hesitated, and then finally he nodded. I watched as he walked away, his shoulders slumped, his steps slow. And this time I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Sure. Here's a fully expanded chapter 5, bringing deeper emotions, richer details, and a satisfying resolution. The weeks after David's last visit felt different. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I wasn't replaying old conversations, searching for the moment when everything had gone wrong. I wasn't wondering if I could have fixed what had already been broken beyond repair. Instead, I was just living. It wasn't easy at first. Grief lingers in unexpected ways. Even when you know something is over, even when you don't want it back, there's still an ache for what once was. But day by day, that ache started to fade. It was in the little things, waking up to a quiet house and realizing I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for another argument. Cooking dinner without wondering if David would come home late or cancel plans with the kids. Drinking my morning coffee and not feeling the weight of loneliness pressing against my chest. And slowly I started rebuilding. Not just my life, but myself. A new routine, a new life. I threw myself into things I had neglected for years. Painting, hiking, Sunday morning farmers markets with Emily, game nights with Josh. For the first time in a long time, I was living my life for myself, not for David, not for the marriage, not for the illusion of what we had been. But that didn't mean the past didn't try to pull me back. David was still there, in the periphery. He still had his weekends with the kids, though they became more sporadic. He still called me sometimes, usually late at night, his voice thick with regret. But I didn't pick up anymore. I had learned my lesson. Some people only realize what they had once they've lost it. And some people like David never really know what they want at all. The unexpected text. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at work sorting through emails when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen expecting a message from Emily or Josh. But instead it was from Mark. Mark. Hope you're having a good day. Let me know if you want to grab coffee sometime. No pressure, of course. I stared at the message longer than necessary. I had met Mark 3 months earlier, after Emily, tired of watching me go through the motions of life, had signed me up for a dating app. He had been different from the start. Patient, thoughtful, a good listener. He hadn't pushed, hadn't demanded anything from me. He had simply waited. And now, here he was again, offering me an easy out, as if he knew I still hesitated when it came to new beginnings. I took a deep breath and typed back a response. Me coffee sounds nice. And with that, something inside me shifted. The second first date. Meeting Mark again felt familiar but different. It was a cool evening, the first signs of autumn creeping into the air. We met at a quiet coffee shop, the kind with dim lighting and the smell of roasted espresso beans filling the space. Mark was already there when I arrived, standing near the door, hands in his pockets. He smiled when he saw me. Anna. I smiled back. Hi. We found a corner table near the window. And as the conversation started, I realized something. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't comparing him to David. I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I was just here. With him. And it felt good. Mark stirred his coffee, glancing at me thoughtfully. You seem different. I tilted my head. Different how? Lighter, he said. Like you're not carrying the weight of the world anymore. I paused, letting his words settle. Maybe he was right. Maybe for the first time in years I was finally letting go. The kids' reactions. I kept my relationship with Mark quiet at first. Not because I was ashamed, but because, after everything, I wanted to be sure. For myself. For my kids. One evening, a few weeks after Mark and I had started seeing each other regularly, I sat down with Emily and Josh in the living room. They were both curled up on the couch, half watching a movie, half scrolling through their phones. I cleared my throat. I need to tell you both something. Emily looked up instantly. You're dating someone. Josh groaned. Mom, we already know. I blinked. You do. Emily smirked. You're not as subtle as you think. Josh shrugged. Yeah, and besides, you seem happy. So, it's cool. I exhaled, relief washing over me. I had spent so long worrying about how they would react, about whether they would feel betrayed, about whether it was too soon. But in the end, they just wanted me to be happy. And for the first time in a long time, I was David's last attempt. I should have known David wouldn't stay silent forever. A few months after I started seeing Mark, he called again. But this time it wasn't late at night. It wasn't slurred words and drunken apologies. It was deliberate, planned. I want to talk, he said. I sighed. David dash. Please, Anna. Just once. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet diner, the kind we used to go to when we were young and broke and in love. David looked different. Thinner. Tired. A shadow of the man he had once been. He didn't waste time. I miss you, he said. I didn't say anything. I miss us. I sighed, setting my coffee cup down. David dash. I was an idiot, he interrupted. I thought I wanted freedom, but all I did was ruin everything. I lost my job. The women, the parties, the excitement, it was all fake. The only thing that was ever real was you. His voice cracked, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I had once loved. The man who had held me as I cried. The man who had whispered promises to me late at night. But that man was gone, and I wasn't going to spend my life waiting for him to come back. I'm sorry, David, I said softly, but it's too late. His eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Desperation. Regret. Loss. You're with someone else, he realized. I didn't deny it. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Do you love him? I thought about Mark. About the way he made me feel safe. About the way he looked at me like I was enough. About the way he had waited for me, never pushing, never expecting, just being there. And I knew my answer. Yes, I said. I do. David looked down. I knew this was the moment he truly understood. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't his anymore. I stood up, pulling my coat around me. Goodbye, David. And then I walked away. For the last time. A love that stayed. A year later, I stood at the edge of a lake, the autumn air crisp against my skin. Mark stood beside me, his fingers intertwined with mine. Emily and Josh were a few feet away, skipping rocks across the water, their laughter carrying through the cool evening air. I took a deep breath, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky painted in soft pinks and oranges. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I had gained. I looked up at Mark, who was watching me with quiet patience, and I realized something. I was happy, truly deeply happy, and this time I wasn't afraid to hold on to it. Anna's journey is a powerful reminder that every choice we make has consequences, not just for ourselves, but for the people who love us. David believed that chasing excitement would bring him happiness, but instead, he lost everything that truly mattered. His actions caused pain, not just for himself but for his children and the woman who once stood by his side. Meanwhile, Anna chose a different path. She chose resilience, kindness, and self-respect. And in the end, she found a love that was true and lasting. This story reflects an important truth. Our actions shape our destiny. When we act with integrity, remain patient, and stay true to our values, life rewards us in ways we never expect. On the other hand, when we chase temporary pleasures at the expense of the people who love us, we often find ourselves alone, filled with regret. So, what can we learn from this? First, loyalty and love should never be taken for granted. The people who stand beside us in life, the ones who support us, who forgive us, who love us unconditionally, are treasures. When we fail to appreciate them, we risk losing them forever. Second, true happiness doesn't come from external pleasures, parties, validation from strangers, or reckless freedom. Comes from within. It comes from building something meaningful, treating others with kindness, and being someone others can trust. And finally, goodness always finds its way back. Anna could have become bitter. She could have sought revenge, let anger consume her, or lost faith in love. But instead, she remained patient and compassionate. And in the end, she found happiness again. This is the power of doing what is right even when it's hard. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment in life where a choice, yours or someone else, changed everything? Do you believe in karma? Have you seen examples of how good or bad actions came back to a person later in life? If you were in Anna's position, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's start a conversation. And if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to subscribe to Endless Romance. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.